It was a crisp autumn evening in Oak Ridge, the kind of night when the city lights glowed against the dark sky and the streets hummed with life. Officer Daniel Brooks, a veteran cop with a short fuse and a long history of questionable encounters, sat in his cruiser, sipping coffee and scanning the sidewalk. Then he saw her. A black woman, mid-40s, well-dressed in a navy blazer and dark jeans, walking confidently along the sidewalk. Something about her irritated him, the way she carried herself, like she owned the street. He had seen too many like her, thinking they were untouchable. He decided to follow. Chief Cassandra Lewis had just wrapped up a meeting with city officials discussing police reform efforts. After years of fighting her way up the ranks, she was now the first black female police chief in Oak Ridge history. She had dealt with racist officers before, some openly defiant, others more subtle, but she never let them see her sweat. Tonight, she was just trying to get home. As she neared the parking garage, she felt it. The heavy gaze, the predator-like presence. She turned slightly, catching the reflection of red and blue lights in a store window. A police car. She sighed. Here we go. The cruiser pulled up beside her, and the window rolled down. "Hey, you!" Brooks barked. "Come here." Cassandra raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me." "You heard me. What are you doing out here?" His tone was sharp, accusatory. "I'm walking. That a crime now?" Brooks clenched his jaw. "Don't get smart with me." "Let's see some ID." Cassandra stared at him. She had handled thousands of situations like this, but tonight she was off duty, in civilian clothes. No badge to flash. No uniform to shield her. She pulled out her phone. "Are you detaining me?" Brooks narrowed his eyes. "I don't like your attitude." And then it happened. Fast, violent, and without warning. Before Cassandra could react, Brooks yanked open his car door and stepped out. She barely had time to take a step back before he grabbed her arm, twisting it behind her. "Hey!" she shouted. "Get your hands off me!" Brooks shoved her against the hood of his cruiser. "Resisting, huh? You people never learn." Cassandra's heart pounded. The cold metal of the car pressed against her cheek. Rage burned in her chest. She could hear a crowd gathering. Gasps. Whispers. Someone pulled out a phone. And then, "Officer, step away from her immediately." A sharp, authoritative voice cut through the tension. Brooks turned, annoyed, only to see 3 uniformed officers approaching. One of them, Deputy Chief Ray Morales, his superior. His stomach dropped. What happened next would change everything. For a split second, Officer Brooks hesitated. His grip on Cassandra's arm loosened, but not enough to let her go. His eyes darted between the crowd, the recording phones, and Deputy Chief Ray Morales, who was marching toward him with 2 other officers. "What the hell are you doing, Brooks?" Morales demanded, his voice sharp and commanding. Brooks straightened, still holding Cassandra's wrist. "She was acting suspicious," he said, his voice laced with fake confidence. "Refused to show ID." Morales' eyes flicked to Cassandra, whose face was a mixture of restrained fury and disbelief. Then recognition dawned. His heart stopped. "Oh my God," Morales whispered. "Chief Lewis." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some people gasped. Others cursed under their breath. Brooks frowned. "What?" Morales turned back to him, his expression now unreadable. "Let her go." Brooks, still confused, finally released his grip. Cassandra rolled her shoulder, stepping back, inhaling deeply to keep her composure. She locked eyes with Morales, who gave her the smallest nod of understanding. Then she turned to Brooks. He was still glaring at her, but something in his face had changed, an uneasiness creeping into his eyes. Cassandra dusted off her blazer, her voice steady. "You assaulted me, Officer Brooks." Brooks scoffed. "Assaulted? Lady, I was doing my job." Cassandra took a slow step forward. "Do you know who I am?" His jaw tightened. "I don't care who you are. I told you to show ID." She interrupted, voice now razor-sharp, "am Cassandra Lewis, Chief of Police." The weight of her words crashed down like a thunderclap. Brooks' face drained of color. He took half a step back, his mouth opening but no words coming out. Someone in the crowd whistled. "Damn," a voice murmured. "He's done." Morales stepped between them, his voice tight. "Chief, Cassandra raised a hand, silencing him. Her eyes never left Brooks. "You profiled me. You targeted me. You put your hands on me because, in your mind, a black woman in nice clothes walking down the street had to be a threat." Brooks swallowed. Save it." Her words cut like a blade. Morales stepped closer. "Chief." Morales stepped closer. "Chief, I can handle this." Cassandra exhaled slowly, then nodded. "Oh, you'll handle it, all right? Because as of right now—" She turned back to Brooks, her voice like ice. "You're suspended." The crowd erupted into whispers, gasps, and stunned reactions. Brooks' mouth hung open in shock. You can't do that." Cassandra crossed her arms. "Try me." Brooks turned to Morales for help, but the deputy chief only shook his head. "Give me your badge and gun." Brooks clenched his fists, his entire world crumbling in real time. Then, without another word, he unholstered his weapon, unclipped his badge, and placed them in Morales's outstretched hand. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. For a long moment, Brooks just stood there, his hands twitching at his sides. The weight of the badge and gun being taken from him was suffocating. But what made it worse was the crowd. Watching, whispering, recording. His career, his reputation, everything was slipping through his fingers. "This is bullshit," he muttered under his breath. Cassandra heard him. "What's bullshit, Officer Brooks?" she asked, tilting her head. "The fact that you assaulted an unarmed citizen for no reason? Or the fact that you finally have to face the consequences?" Brooks' eyes flicked up to hers, dark with resentment. "You set me up." The crowd reacted instantly. "She set you up?" A man in a gray hoodie scoffed. "Bruh, she was just walking." "Yeah, man," another voice added. "She ain't do nothing. You're just mad you got caught." Cassandra remained composed, but she could feel the heat behind her ribs, the kind that had been simmering for years. "Let me make something clear," she said, her voice strong. "You weren't set up. You were exposed." Brooks' face twitched, his jaw tightening. Morales placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "You need to leave. Now." Brooks looked at him, then at the badge and gun in Morales's hands. His hands clenched into fists. Then he turned on his heel and stalked away, shoving past a few bystanders as he made his way to his cruiser. The crowd parted, watching in silence. Some were smirking, others shaking their heads. And then a voice from the back called out, "We ain't forget about you, Brooks." Laughter rippled through the group. Brooks slammed his car door shut, his face burning with shame. Within seconds, his cruiser peeled off into the night. Cassandra let out a slow breath, steadying herself. But she wasn't done yet. She turned to Morales. "I want a full investigation. Every complaint against him, every report. Dig up everything." Morales nodded. "Already on it." She looked at the other two officers. "Make sure that footage doesn't disappear. I want every recording from the bystanders saved." One of them, a younger officer, hesitated before nodding. "Yes, Chief." Cassandra turned back to the crowd, scanning their faces. "Thank you all for witnessing this," she said. "If any of you recorded, please send it to the department. The truth matters." A woman in a red jacket stepped forward, holding up her phone. "I got the whole thing." Cassandra nodded. "Good." She took one last deep breath and turned toward the parking garage. The night air felt heavier now. This wasn't just another bad cop. This was a war inside her own department. And it was far from over. 2 hours later, Cassandra sat in her dimly lit office, the glow of her desk lamp casting long shadows against the walls. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving behind a dull ache in her shoulders. She had been in the force long enough to know what came next. The backlash. Her phone buzzed for what felt like the 100th time. News outlets were already running the story. Social media was on fire with videos of Brooks slamming her against the cruiser, followed by his humiliating suspension. The department's PR team was scrambling, trying to control the narrative. And then there were the emails. The subject lines told her everything she needed to know. "You're ruining this department." "Traitor. Stay in your place." She exhaled through her nose, clicking out of her inbox. None of this was surprising. The moment she took this job, she knew she was stepping into a battleground. Some officers had never accepted her authority. Others had been waiting for an opportunity to take her down. And Brooks? He was just the tip of the iceberg. A knock at the door broke her thoughts. "Come in." Morales stepped inside, closing the door behind him. His expression was grim. "You were right," he said, placing a file on her desk. "Brooks has a history." Cassandra flipped it open. Pages of complaints, excessive force, racial profiling, even an incident where he allegedly broke a suspect's arm during an arrest. None of them had resulted in disciplinary action. She clenched her jaw. How did he survive this long? Morales sighed. He's protected, got connections higher up. Cassandra's stomach twisted. She had expected as much, but seeing it in black and white made her blood boil. "Chief," Morales continued, lowering his voice, "it's worse than just Brooks." She looked up. "What do you mean?" Morales hesitated before pulling out another folder. He slid it across the desk. Cassandra opened it. What she saw made her breath catch. Internal messages, group chats between officers, and there it was. Disgusting, blatant racism, officers mocking her, calling her slurs, making jokes about how she wouldn't last long. And Brooks, he wasn't just a participant, he was one of the ringleaders. Cassandra closed the folder, pressing her fingers against her temple. This wasn't just about one bad cop, it was a system, a culture. Morales cleared his throat. "What do you want to do?" Cassandra looked up, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she closed the folder and placed both hands flat on the desk. "We clean house," she said. Morales nodded, but there was worry in his eyes. "You know they're not going to go down without a fight." Cassandra's lips curled into a humorless smile. "Then they'll learn the hard way." The war had just begun. 3 days later, the walls of the Oak Ridge Police Department buzzed with tension. Officers spoke in hushed tones, exchanging uneasy glances as Cassandra walked past them. Some stood at attention, pretending to be busy. Others barely hid their resentment. They knew what was coming. Cassandra entered the conference room where Morales and the department's internal affairs team were waiting. The air was thick with anticipation. A large screen displayed the list of officers under investigation. Brooks was just one of many. "All right," Cassandra said, dropping the latest reports on the table. "We start the suspensions today." Morales exhaled. "You sure you want to do this all at once?" "We don't have a choice," she replied. "If we take them down one by one, they'll have time to cover for each other." A younger officer, Detective Nia Reynolds, nodded in agreement. "They've been running unchecked for years. We hit them fast, hit them hard." Cassandra met her gaze and gave a slight nod. "Then let's move." 30 minutes later. The first officer on the list was Captain James Rollins. A 20-year veteran with deep connections, he was one of the department's most powerful figures and a key player in protecting dirty cops like Brooks. Cassandra and Morales approached his office. Without knocking, she pushed open the door. Rollins was mid-sip from his coffee when he saw them. His eyes flickered with recognition, then anger. "What the hell do you want?" he growled. Cassandra held up a folder. "Captain James Rollins, you're officially under investigation for misconduct, including enabling and covering up officer abuses." Rollins scoffed, setting his cup down with unnecessary force. "You can't be serious." Morales handed him an official letter. "You're suspended effective immediately pending investigation." Rollins stood slowly, his massive frame radiating hostility. "This is a witch hunt." Cassandra didn't flinch. This is accountability. Rollins chuckled darkly, stepping closer. You really think you can purge this department? You think these men are going to let you do this? Cassandra met his gaze, unwavering. Let me? I don't need permission. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Rollins leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. You have no idea what you've started. Charged multiple officers with crimes ranging from obstruction of justice to conspiracy. Captain James Rollins, the ringleader of this corruption, has been arrested and will face trial. More cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cassandra continued. This is not just about a few bad cops. This is about rebuilding trust. I took this job to serve this community, and I will not stop until every last officer who disgraces this badge is gone. She leaned forward slightly, her voice unwavering. To those who think they can silence me, intimidate me, or stop me, I have one message. You failed. The room erupted in applause. 3 months later, Oak Ridge PD Cassandra walked through the halls of the department, now quieter, cleaner. New officers were being trained. Old structures had been torn down. Was it perfect? It was better. And for the first time in a long time, there was hope.